welcome back to Tales of Faith, a podcast on the Narrative Lectionary. I'm the Reverend AJ Ochart. My pronouns are he, him.
And I'm Louise Ochart. My pronouns are she, her. This is episode 408 for the 20th Sunday after Pentecost on October 26th, 2025. Though we are recording on October 14th, so if something major has happened between when we recorded and when you are listening, obviously we cannot address it.
Today we're talking about 1 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 to 5, and then 8, 1 to 13, and also talking about some of the other stuff in between. We'll be using the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition, unless otherwise noted. So let's get started with context. So overall context, last time we talked about the calling of David and the anointing of David. So David has a long sort of career as the king, first of the southern countries of Judah, or the tribes of Judah, and then later as all 12 of the tribes. Leads as an ostensibly righteous king, though we talked about there were some tough moments throughout his sort of career. So especially later in his kingship is we have the Bathsheba incident, of course. But then after that, you have the rape of Tamar by her half brother, Absalom. Absalom then is sort of not punished, is sent away for a little bit. Then he comes back, and then he ends up usurping David as the king of Jerusalem. Part of this is all Nathan the prophet says that because of this thing that David has done with Bathsheba and her husband, that the sword will never leave his household, and that's what happens. His children keep kind of killing each other. There's all sorts of turmoil, and he loses the kingship for a while, comes back. We summed up a bunch of this last time too, but then in First Kings you have sort of a discussion over who should take over. David is quite old, and it turns out, it comes about that Solomon is pronounced the king. He is the son of Bathsheba, so he is crowned. Immediately the instructions from David are, lead in righteousness and in peace. Oh, also kill all the people who I don't like. And so there's this sort of like assassinations that he does. We have the famous sort of asking for wisdom of God and God granting it, and stories of Solomon's wisdom, all sorts of great stuff. And then we have this sort of desire that David had to build a temple, a house for God in Jerusalem, because he's built his own palace. And in that, God says, no, you cannot do that, but your son is going to do it for you. And we'll hear that here, because now Solomon is the king. Solomon is going to build the temple. The tabernacle has already been moved to Jerusalem. That was one of the things that David did. David took over this city of Jerusalem, which had never been claimed by any of the tribes. It was another nation's city. He claims it as the capital and brings the tabernacle there. And now he wants to build the temple, which is basically what we're going to be reading about here. So let's go ahead and get to our text.
All right. Um, section 1, 1 Kings 5, 1 to 5, continued trade relations. Now King Hiram of Tyre sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father. For Hiram had always been a friend of David. Solomon sent word to Hiram, saying, "You know that my father David could not build a house for the Lord, for the name of the Lord his God, because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him, until he put them under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune. So I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord said to my father David, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, shall build the house for my name."
Um, so basically, this is just the setting of this story. There's not anything really big in this particular part, other than we now have sort of a continuation of this relationship between King Hiram and Solomon. Had good relations with David, and that's where this is going. Is King Hiram is going to be pretty um, important in providing the materials to build this temple, which we'll actually get in the interstitial. So, but just this section is starting to sort of have relationship and whatever you need. And Solomon says, well, actually I need a bunch of supplies because I'm trying to build this house for the Lord. But we have the sort of a reiteration of sort of the setup. I want to build a house for the name of the Lord. My father tried to do it. He was not allowed to do it because he had enemies on all sides. So now that we're in this time of peace, I'm going to be able to do this.
So. Yeah, I do find it so interesting the way that they refer to God as, like, Solomon doesn't say our God or my God. It's when he's talking about David, it's his God. And then when he's talking about himself, it's my God. But it's almost like the ownership of God has to pass from one person to the other. Like,
oh, interesting.
It's just such an odd, it's just got such an odd sound to my ears, I guess. But in a way, it's, now that I'm in charge, I get to claim God as my own.
And that this relationship is always with the person to whom God is talking.
Yeah.
So David tried to make a house for the Lord his God because God is connecting to David at that point. But now that's an interesting.
It's just an interesting. It's just an interesting phrase. It's just it's interesting the way that, and then of course the other interesting phrase is, build a house for the name of the Lord my God. And is that because we're talking about building a house for the Ark of the Covenant, or is that just because that's the way that they refer to God?
Yeah, and this gets to what we'll get to in a little bit in sort of the speech that Solomon gives. Is it's very clear that this is kind of the place where God dwells, but also very intentionally not.
Right.
This is the place of the name of the Lord. This is the place where you can go to sort of be in relationship with this God. But this place doesn't contain God.
Yeah.
And so and the people will sort of, scripture waffles back and forth a little bit about whether this is the place where the actual sort of very presence of God is, and to a certain extent it is, but also it's not, um, this is not the fullness of God that is here. God is not something that can be contained in this building. Solomon will say later. So yeah, so a way of sort of understanding that is this is the place for the name of the Lord. This is the place where you kind of back to tabernacle. It's a tent of meeting. It's the place where you meet with God.
Yeah.
Again, not that God cannot be other places, but this is the place where you can sort of where God is presenced
Yeah.
in a unique way.
Yeah. I just think, yeah, I think it's just an interesting, and I assumed it was something like that, in that sort of, in that vein.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll also note this this phrase of until the Lord or He put them under the soles of His feet. This is, it seems to be connected to Psalm 2, this idea of, you know, today you are my son, I've begotten you, I will put you in this place until I have put all of your enemies under your foot, under your feet. So that may be kind of connected to that same idea.
okay.
Cool. So now we skip over quite a bit, but I'm going to pull up specifically the rest of chapter 5, because I think it's a really important thing for us to understand about who Solomon is. So first thing to remember is that we're talking about a history that is not written sort of, you know, there's the biographer that's sitting beside Solomon and Hiram writing, scribbling down notes, right? This is history that is being written hundreds of years later, likely after the return of the exile. They're looking back at these things and sort of telling where things went. To a certain extent, they're telling why things went the way that they did. But it's also a little bit, as we talked about last time, sort of this, it is a pro dynasty narrative. To a certain extent, they take a high view of David and Solomon, especially David, to a lesser extent Solomon. But there are also some of these sort of subtle things or not so subtle things here. And narrative lectionary just sort of skips over this bit, which you can do with what you want. But we get in the next few verses. So Hiram hears the words of Solomon. He rejoiced greatly and said, "Blessed be the Lord today, who has given to David a wise son to be over this great people." Hiram sent word to Solomon, "I have heard the message that you have sent to me. I will fulfill all your needs in the matter of cedar and cypress timber. My servants shall bring it down to the sea from the Lebanon. I will make it into rafts and go by sea to the place you indicate. I will have them broken up before you to take away, and you shall meet my needs by providing food for my household." So Hiram supplied Solomon's every need for timber and cedar and cypress. Solomon in turn gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household and 20 cores of fine oil. Solomon gave this to Hiram year by year. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as God had promised him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. Wonderful, right? We have a little bit more information about this sort of back and forth. Hiram is providing fine timber for the building of the house of the Lord to Solomon. Solomon is providing Hiram with food and oil. Great. This is a fair deal. Everyone is doing great. Everyone is being enriched by this situation. Verse 13. King Solomon conscripted forced labor out of all Israel. The levy numbered 30,000 men. He sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. They would be a month in the Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adria- Ad- Adorniram, sure, was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon also had 70,000 laborers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hill country, besides Solomon's 3,300 supervisors who were over the work, having charge of the people who did the work. At the king's command, they quarried with out great costly stones in order to lay the foundation of the house with dressed stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders and the Gebalites did the stone cutting and prepared the timbers and the stone to build the house. So while he was willing to engage in sort of like fair trade with this foreign king, he then conscripts labor to build this thing from the people of Israel. He just grabs them and says, all right, you're going to Lebanon, you're going to work a month, and then you can come back for a little while, and then you're going back, and you're going to be doing this until this house of the Lord is done. And it's not commented on, but in the narrative, there's very much this idea of, hey, remember you were enslaved when you were in Egypt. Don't do this to other people. And Solomon here is using conscripted enslaved labor, right? He is using his own people, forcing them to build this thing. Like their ancestors in this story were used to build the cities of Gihon and Ramesses, right? So this is not a great thing. So that's something to keep in mind as we're considering Solomon. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, just the like, yeah, there was peace treaty between Hiram and Solomon. Yeah, they're both getting a lot of good out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and that's not trickling down to the people.
Right.
And this is the issue with kings. This is the issue that God brought up with the whole idea of kings.
Mm-hmm.
Kings are not good for the people. Kings are good for the kings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much, this is class consciousness stuff, right? These are the millionaires, billionaires. They are making deals. Everything's good for them. They're going to make a lot of money, and it's the people who have to actually do it.
Yeah, the people have to actually do the work.
With no choice, and
yeah, leaving their homes for a month.
And I'm not sure, because it says how much they are being paid, I think. I suspect that if an analysis was done, this would not be this would be a very minimal sort of pay for this work.
Yeah. Yeah, we're probably not looking at a living wage here.
Yeah. And then in chapter 6 and 7, it goes through pretty, a lot of detail on exactly how it's built and put together. A lot of it is not quite a duplication, but it's very much in the vein of the description of how you build the tabernacle, similar sort of thing of, they built this and it was made of this particular thing. To sort of carry on that tradition.
Okay. So section 2, 1 Kings 8, 1-11, dedication. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral house of the Israelites, before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. All the people of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the festival in the month of Ethiam,
uh,
Ethanim,
Ethanim.
Ethanim, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests carried the ark. So they brought up the ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought them up. King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel who had assembled before him were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen that they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the house, the most holy place, underneath the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread out their wings over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim made a covering above the ark and its poles. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen from the outside. They are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the two tablets of stone that Moses had placed there at
Horeb.
Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites when they came out of the land of Egypt. And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord.
Right. So it gets finished. They bring the Ark of the Covenant in. Um, and right, this is a great sort of day of celebration. The priests are bringing it. The Levites are bringing up these the all of the different things, and huge amount of sacrifices. And a couple of things to really note is there are some very clear connections being made to the building of the tabernacle in I believe that's the end of Exodus when they actually finish doing it. Notably, there's the cloud that fills the house of the Lord. This is the Shekinah glory. This is the sort of physical presence of the Lord. And it's so thick that the priest can't actually be there. This is something that happens when the tabernacle is first created and put together. So yeah, a couple other things to note. You have in the ark, we have the two tablets of stone that Moses had placed there at Horeb. Again, this comes from the tradition that it was Horeb and not Sinai. So that's something to note. Also to note that there are other places where we hear of some other contents in the Ark of the Covenant. There are these the commandment stones, these sort of standing stones. There's also the staff of Aaron that budded. That was at some point there is said that is in the Ark of the Covenant, as well as a jar of manna. Now the budding staff of Aaron, biblical scholars look back and suggest that actually may have been an Asherah pole, connecting Adonai and Asherah, maybe that they were sort of dual gods at some point, or worshipped together. So this is that part of the tradition is maybe here intentionally left out, that it's just the Ten Commandments, the standing stones. So that's kind of interesting. Anything else that you noticed?
So hard to notice anything with Ahsoka. Well, I just, we start out by it's not the Solomon does not initially assemble all the people, right? As is always the way. The people that actually did the building, the people that actually did the work, they don't get to be the ones up front. right?
It's the
It's
elders.
the
Yeah.
elders and the heads of the tribes and the leaders of the ancestral houses, right? And then it's not until, I mean, then eventually we get to the people of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the festival. Um, but it's not even so, yeah, so the people, so the elders and the heads of the tribes and the leaders of the ancestral houses of Israel assemble before King Solomon in Jerusalem to bring the Ark of the Covenant up. And then all the people of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the festival in the month. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so, I mean, I just think it's interesting that, of
Mhm.
course,
Yeah.
it's the people who did the building, the people that were conscripted, you know, they don't even get recognized for their
Yeah.
work. Um,
I'll note, so this is in the seventh month, which uh 7 is this very sacred number, and
mhm,
in the Hebrew calendar, the seventh month, this is the month where you have we're actually in right now, I believe still. This is when um Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement and all of these like high holy days are all kind of smashed
mhm.
together here in the seventh month. So it's definitely this is, I would guess this is intended to be during the Day of Atonement, which is the day when the Holy of Holies is to be cleansed with these sacrifices, and so it seems like they're doing that just
Two birds, one stone. Uh,
yeah, exactly.
um, yeah, and then section 3, 1 Kings 8, 12 to 13, a dwelling place for God. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever." Just that's it.
That's it.
Those
I
two.
probably should have connected them together, but
Sorry. Um,
um but again, this sort of pronouncement, it's in verse form. Oftentimes that means that it may have predated. That was probably the earliest stuff, maybe passed on, and so now, so the narrative is sort of created to give context to this piece of poetry that would have been passed on. Um,
um, yeah, I mean, you know, the only thing I have built you an exalted house.
Yeah, I think that's
Didn't
definitely
do
intentional.
anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Swing a hammer. You conscripted a whole bunch of people to do the work. Like, it's just
He
very,
may have
you
had
know,
like a golden hammer, like for the
yeah,
photo
ding,
op. To, yeah.
yeah, it's cutting the ribbon. Um, but you know, just that I have built, and it's not even an acknowledgement that God,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's very, just very pompous.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's very much there.
Yeah. Um, and almost like because it says the Lord had said he would dwell in thick darkness. It's almost like, but I have built you an exalted house. I even know better than you.
Mhm.
Right.
And this draws us back to the so the story in Second Samuel when David says, "I'm going to build a house." He says to Nathan, uh, and and Nathan says, "Great, that sounds like a wonderful idea." And then Nathan talks to God, and God says, "No, no, 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 I don't want that." And part of the answer is all of these years I've gone about and I've lived throughout the land in the tabernacle. When
Yeah.
did I ever say to any of your ancestors that I wanted to have a house made of stone?
Yeah.
I didn't want a permanent place. There's something about the impermanence of the tabernacle that seems to be in the narrative, it seems to be the desired effect. And back to, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about um, sort of the technological advancement there of the ability to have a temple that is movable
Yeah.
is actually an advancement. It is something that that is an ideal situation. And then you sort of then miniaturize that to this Ark of the Covenant. And we had, that was part of that thing where they brought that Ark of the Covenant to the battle and then lost it, right? So it's not a good, it's not a great, but part of it is this ability to bring your God where you need the God to be,
Yeah.
right? This is like,
well, and a reminder that God is with the people.
exactly.
Not,
yeah.
you know,
Up in high towers.
where you can't reach, and this and it just also strikes me that, like, whenever we build a building, it becomes less about the inhabitants of the building and more about the building.
Yeah.
And that whenever, we build these, and there is something to be said for the beauty and this,
absolutely.
that are in some of the cathedrals and things like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of them. I swear that's all we did when I did the summer semesters. We went to a new cathedral every freaking week. And there is, there is something to be said for the beauty, but I don't know is that it's enough to outweigh what ends up happening. That concentration, not only do we then become all about upkeep of the building and that, but we also then concentrate power in that place.
Yep.
And so I think that there's a lot to be said for this idea that God moves among his people, among God's people.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten that because we've gotten so caught up in this concept of the building and of the place and of the church being a building instead of the church being the people.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that tension is here. We see it, and as we go through Solomon's speech, you see glimmers of it. The sort of idea of almost like we're moving backwards. We are trying to contain God in this one place. And God doesn't necessarily want that. Yeah. God is in deep darkness and thick darkness, and the sort of like God shows up where God's going to show up. Yeah. I think that's very much there. So Solomon gives this huge, or this very long speech, which it makes perfect sense why it was not chosen for the text, but just a few things that are in here. So in verse 16, there's this idea that so Solomon is talking about and sort of going over the history and this idea that God brought the people of Israel out of Egypt. And that God has chosen Jerusalem in order that my name may be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people Israel. Again, very much this sort of idea of centralizing that power.
Yeah.
There is something to this idea that so Saul, in all his faults, he was at I don't remember his city that he sort of had his capital, but that the tabernacle was in various places during that time. And part of what David does is this sort of centralization is we're going to have sort of the power, the seat of power, but also the seat of the temple is also going to be here. So this, everything is in this center. Now on a more sort of charitable side, he chooses a city that did not belong to any of the tribes. It is the big sort of divide between Israel and Judah is the sort of like north-south divide. And it's basically on the border there. It's not quite on the border, but it is sort of central between those two. So there's a lot of things that are kind of good about Jerusalem. It's a decent sort of tactical um, place, but there's also this centralization of power and authority and all of that. Solomon keeps going, and then in verse 23 we get that sort of idea of God not being contained. O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath, keeping covenant and steadfast love with your servants who walk before you with all their heart. The covenant that you kept for your servant my father David, as you declared to him, you promised with your mouth and have this day fulfilled with your hand. Therefore, O Lord, God of Israel, keep for your servant my father David that which you promised him, saying, there shall be never fail you a successor before me to sit on the throne of Israel. If only your children looked to their way to walk before me as you have walked before me. Therefore, O God of Israel, let your words be confirmed that you have promised to your servant my father David. But sorry, so that's more about the sort of like, again, all of the hope and the promises are tied up in David and this promise of a future king and a continued dynasty, a continued Davidic dynasty. This is especially important for, again, likely the people who are writing this story down as they are returning from Babylon, this sort of future hope that God said that there's this idea of a continued dynasty. And while we have lost our kingdom, we are sort of rebuilding. We are continuing to be vassals of the empire. We have this sort of continued hope that God is going to continue to be faithful. Sorry.
No, I was saying it's just so interesting that while being under the heel of one king, they are looking towards a time in which they are under the heel of another king. Because that one's their king.
But under our king, right?
Right.
And part of the allure of sort of the David, I'll say mythos, not to say it's necessarily not true, but like there's a myth to David. There is sort of a larger than life quality to him. This idea of a king that would actually at least attempt righteousness.
Right.
And there are a couple of others who maybe get a little bit closer there, but David definitely always has this this place of honor, this place of at least at one time we had a king who actually attempted to follow the law.
Yeah. And when he did not, was genuinely remorseful.
Right.
And I mean, we do get the sense that David did not become so corrupt with power as many of the kings did. Yeah. Did he do terrible things? Yes, absolutely. And, we should hold him accountable for those things in the way that we speak about him. But, we look at Saul and how, he would not give up his throne because he got so enthralled with the power.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I can see that hope for a ruler of your own. It is just still interesting that the only thing we keep hoping for is somebody to tell us what to do.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. There's also a little bit of this sort of like, hey, everybody, remember that David, who was great, he was my dad. So my dad, David, who was my dad, and also David, and also my dad, like there's this.
Yeah.
let's just all remember who I am and why
Yeah.
I'm so great and
Why?
that sort
Yeah.
of stuff.
Let me remember my heritage, my
Yeah.
ancestors, my. Let's talk about the alum here.
Yeah.
The legacy.
Mhm.
Um,
Then in verse 27, this is where we get to the sort of idea of, will God dwell on earth? But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built.
that I have built.
Right. I have built it. But again, a true recognition of like God is not contained in
Yeah.
this building. Regard your servant's prayer and his plea, O Lord my God, heeding the cry and the prayer that your servant prays to you today, that your eyes may be open night and day towards this house, this place of which you said, my name shall be there, that you may heed the prayer that your servant prays towards this place. Hear the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. O hear in heaven and your dwelling place, hear and forgive. So we go from this idea that God cannot be contained in any one place, but we do have this place that we can go to cry out to the Lord.
Yeah.
And this sort of begins this next section. And so things like, when your people Israel, having sinned against you, are defeated before an enemy, but turn again to you, confess your name, pray and plead with you in this house, then hear in heaven, forgive the sin of your people Israel, and bring them again to the land that you gave to their ancestors. Again, very likely from these people who have experienced exile.
Yeah.
And who have now come back. So they write this into this idea of like, one day we will leave
and come back,
but you'll bring us back. This idea that like, when foreigners who are not of your people Israel come from a distant land because of your name, if they shall hear of your great name, your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, when foreigners come and pray toward this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place and do whatever the foreigners ask of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and so they may know that your name has been invoked in this house that I have built. So this idea of the sort of ever expanding nature, that is, we find throughout the Hebrew scriptures, this idea that, Abraham's descendants will be blessed, and that all the nations of the world will be blessed.
Yeah.
And now this idea of, so yes, we've built a temple for the Lord, but not only is this a place that we can come and cry out to the Lord, but it's also a place where everyone else can do this.
Yeah.
This is this sort of the idea of that, your house is to be a prayer, a place of house of prayer for all the nations, that Jesus quotes.
Yeah. Just that this is for everyone.
Yeah.
And that is, and I will say that reminder of a place.
Mm-hmm.
While I get hung up on the like, do we put too much time and energy into buildings?
Yeah.
It is beautiful to have a place that you can more easily connect with God, more easily find God's presence, more deeply feel calm and know that this is a place that I can go. And that is important. And that is especially for a group that did not have that and does not have that.
And just as humans who are embodied, place is important for us.
Yeah. A place in the world, our place in,
and then this, again, verse 46. So if they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you are angry with them and give them to an enemy, so that they are carried away captive to the land of the enemy, far off or near, just hypothetically, just
If
in
this
case
should
that if
happen.
this should happen, right? Then they will come to their senses in the land to which they have been taken captive and repent and plead with you in the land of their captors, saying, we have sinned and have done wrong. We have acted wickedly. If they repent with all their heart and soul in the land of their enemies, who took them captive, and pray to you towards this land, their land that you gave to their ancestors, the city that you have chosen, the house that I have built for your name, then hear in heaven, your dwelling place, their prayer and their plea, maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you and all their transgressions that they have committed against you, and grant them compassion in the sight of their captors, so that they may have compassion on them. For they are your people and heritage that you brought out of Egypt from the midst of the iron smelter. Let your eyes be open to the plea of your servant, to the plea of your people Israel, listening to them whenever they call to you, for you have separated them from among all the peoples of the earth to be your heritage, just as you promised through Moses your servant, when you brought our ancestors out of Egypt, O Lord God. So very much this idea of, if we were to be brought out of the land, then bring us back. But then also a reminder back in the story of the God who brings out of Egypt. And part of it is also this, that this place is a reminder of the Lord and the things that the Lord has called them to. So the Lord our God will be with us as God was with our ancestors. May God not leave us or abandon us, but incline our hearts to God, to walk in God's ways and to keep God's commandments, God's statutes, and God's ordinances that God commanded our ancestors. Which again, for this Deuteronomic history, is so important. Our hearts need to be turned towards God,
Right.
and part of the story that they're telling is, but it wasn't. Our hearts were not inclined towards God, and so God turned away from us and allowed us to be brought out of the land and then brought back. And so that it's this constant sort of turning back to the Lord.
Yeah.
And this temple, while it is this sort of place of potentially corruption, very much a place of sort of the centering of power and authority, and privilege and all of these sorts of things, it is also this beautiful symbol of this place that we can come back to.
Yeah.
This place that we can turn back to. This place that we know that if God has refused to listen to us because of what we're doing in other places, we know the process by which we can be heard by God. Yeah. And this sort of, it becomes this focal point. So in the book of Daniel, we have this idea, this sense that for the exiles, not only praying, but praying towards Jerusalem. This sounds very familiar. Our Muslim siblings will pray towards Mecca because it's the sort of, it is a physical, it's a physical manifestation of this focusing and a centering towards a particular purpose and a particular goal. And so it is both of these things. It is this, as it are our places of worship today, as we have.
Yeah, there's beauty and community and peace and grace, and there is also infighting and misspent funds and clinging to the past, and it's there is a duality there that we need to be aware of, and focus on the things that the buildings allow us to do, but not get so caught up in the building that we forget the reason for the building. And let the beauty be part of it, but that shouldn't be the main focus.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's this idea that we can center ourselves in a physical space, but that physical space is not the center of everything.
and we're not meant to stay in that space.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
It's a place to reorient, to reaffirm, and then go out and do what we're called to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, things continue for Solomon. Just to tell the rest of the story, Solomon is an interesting character. He eventually he has 300 wives, and
which is a bad idea in case anyone's wondering.
it's a lot of wives. And what?
Nothing.
Accurate.
Now I'm just thinking about Sister Wives.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was not a dinner table co-op sort of situation, no. I'm sure. But they, yeah, so gathering all of these wives, and very much part of the text is that they are bringing, like, part of it, the reasons why kings would have multiple wives
right.
is
to make alliances
and treaties,
money and
power. But part of it is also that they're bringing these foreign gods with them, and so Solomon starts to turn aside to these other gods as time goes on. It gets worse and worse and worse. Eventually, Solomon dies, and again leaves the kingdom to one of his sons, and part of it is this. Late in Solomon's life, there's this idea that because David was so good, God has kept the kingdom together for Solomon. But after that, it's going to break apart. And in fact, that's what happens. There is a rival king, and the nations now split back to Israel and in the north and Judah in the south. And then we have this sort of dual trajectory as we're paying attention simultaneously to both of these kingdoms. Sometimes they are aligned with one another, sometimes they are not. Now, most of our scriptures come from the standpoint or the sort of perspective of Judah, the southern country. And so they have a really, really bad view of the nations or the nation of Israel. Part of what that first king does is to establish rival worship spaces in Dan and Bethel, to because they don't want their people to go down to Jerusalem to where that temple is. That king also makes golden calves for the people to worship, which, or at least that's the tale that we have from the Judahites. And this I mean, like, this conflict of where is the appropriate place to worship. We see this all the way in, we will see this later in the narrative lectionary with Jesus speaking to the woman at the well, who is a Samaritan. And part of what she asks is, y'all say that we worship at Zion, and we say that we worship here on this mountain. Which one is the right mountain? Because they have two very different traditions about what the appropriate place to worship is. So things go on, things progress, kings rise and fall, where eventually the next text that we're going to pick up is God speaking to Elijah in First Kings chapter 19. So Elijah is one of the first sort of great prophets, and this is immediately after. So he's primarily working, doing ministry at the time of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who gets quite the rap, especially among evangelicals. Um, and yeah, but Ahab was, according to the text, a not only bad but like a truly horrible king, and a lot of that was the worship of all of these other gods. And so the text that we'll have is immediately after the sort of standoff between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and that's a great story. But I'll go ahead and tell that next week. So yeah, so this Solomon is the last. David and Solomon really are the two. Well, so Saul, David, and Solomon, three are three chief. Never mind.
I knew where you were going.
Yeah.
Well,
I got myself distracted.
distracted.
But these are the three kings of this sort of united kingdom of all of the 12 tribes of Israel and Judah. We're going to say something. Right. That is the sort of story according to the text. Biblical scholars suggest that it's not. It is fairly likely that these were two distinct nations, Israel and Judah. For a while, they were sort of united, but then that didn't last very long. So just a different kind of perspective on that. But there we go. So now we'll go on to Battle Crete.
Oh,
Yeah, this is a tough one.
yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot. Like, I mean, obviously, there's a lot in the like the stuff that you brought in, and there's a lot of history here. I mean, I think maybe. I don't know. What do you?
First of all, just a reminder that there is some freedom within the narrative lectionary. If there is one of these sort of surrounding texts that really sort of speaks to you, it's okay to include that, to include some extra information, depending on what you're looking at. I think probably the place to focus for me is kind of where we ended with that idea of the temple, and by extension our places of worship, being this simultaneously beautiful place to which we can turn in times of trouble, and when we need to repent, when we need to come back to God. This is a physical place where we can do that, where God is present for us, where we can go and pray and worship and be reminded who we are and whose we are.
Yeah.
And also, it can be an idol. Our buildings can absolutely be an idol. These communities can be places of strife and hurt and brokenness, and that sometimes that those two things are true at the same time. And for some people, one can be true more than the other. And that's okay. We can recognize that. You know, I had a pastor who said that we can never close the back door to the church, Um, there are always going to be people who are going to leave. There are always going to be people who are not part of a particular congregation anymore for any number of reasons, and there are thousands of them. As many as there are people who leave churches, or in particular churches. There are some who leave churches altogether. There are people who leave a particular congregation, um, and a health congregation also has an open front door as well, right? So there are people coming in and there are people leaving, and that is sort of a natural, sort of healthy process.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that can be to recognize that we might grieve when people leave a particular congregation for whatever reason, but we can also recognize that there was a time when you could be a part in this particular space and worship God, and it was really meaningful for you. And for you, maybe that time is over and you need to find a different place, and I'm still here. And that we can grieve, but we can also celebrate and
Yeah.
recognize that God is doing something new and different with you. And we can celebrate that new people are coming into the community, and finding God in this place. Um, and part of that is to give some grace to people as maybe they are unable to be in this particular place.
Mm-hmm.
To our, we talk a lot about younger folks who just walk away from the church, um, oftentimes because of deep church hurt. um, and to recognize that when people walk away from a church or the church, it is an act of self preservation, it is an act of self care. And again, we can celebrate that, we can grieve that maybe that's
And we can learn from it.
that we can learn from it, and we can also celebrate that, you know what, part of what we did was to teach you the skills to be able to walk away from this as well.
And we
um,
could be a part of your journey,
exactly.
whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think, I don't think I'll get real heavy with the kids. I
Yeah.
think we'll read the scriptures, but I think what I would love for them to do is to build where they want to worship,
That's cool.
to build or draw or create a worship space that speaks to them.
Mm-hmm.
Could be indoor, could be outdoor, could be, whatever building material, that's the beauty of Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some now that have really taken to wanting to draw, which is great too. Um, is to create their space
Mm-hmm.
where they feel God dwells,
Mm-hmm.
where they feel the closest to God. Because ultimately, that that is, I think, one of the strengths of the building
Mm-hmm.
is a focal point for our um, a touchstone
Mm-hmm.
for our worship. It's not the only place, and it can certainly, as I've said, I think it can certainly become a hindrance when we put too much time and energy and effort into it. But
Mm-hmm.
excuse me. But that the reason for building the temple, if we take it at face value, was truly to give the people of Israel a place to 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 connect with God
Mm-hmm.
and to focus on that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I'll put more energy. Um, a lot of this is pretty. I think I don't know that there's a whole lot that I'm going to pick out other than just sort of explaining the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We are
It's a relatively short one.
yeah, yeah. Same couch, but I assure you this is in a different place. Um,
Yeah, it's a
um,
very different place.
yeah. And yeah, thank you for your
Patience.
yes, patience
Grace.
as we are getting back on schedule and figuring those things out. But hope that you are doing well. Happy preaching to y'all. And yeah,
Yeah,
like, follow, subscribe,
all the things.
share, all the things. And we'll see you next time.